You said the tariff is a beautiful word. There are some signs in the markets, consumer confidence, that they're a little jittery. So if all goes to plan, when do you think families will be able to feel prices going down, groceries, energy, or are you kind of saying to them, hang on, inflation may get worse until it gets better?
Remember when Trump claimed he would lower inflation on day one? Obviously, a ridiculous exaggeration, but now it seems he's just totally forgetting about it.
We'll become a rich, look, we're not that rich right now. We owe $36 trillion. That's because we let all these nations take advantage of us. Same thing, like 200 billion with Canada. We owe 300. We have a deficit with Mexico of $350 billion. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to let that happen.
So there's Donald Trump responding to a question about inflation by pivoting to tariffs, which could exacerbate inflation. Doesn't seem like ending inflation on day one was really the priority to begin with. And we're now seeing some new economic data that does not bode well for Americans who have been really crushed with higher grocery prices, higher energy prices over the last few years. Turns out inflation has been rising under Donald Trump, which is a far cry from the bold promises he made on the campaign trail. Take a look.
Starting on day one of my new administration, we will end inflation and we will make America affordable again because the prices are too high. The prices are too high. So when I win, I will immediately bring prices down. Starting on day one, we will end Kamala's war on American energy and we will drill, baby, drill. We're going to drill. Starting the day I take the oath of office, I will rapidly drive prices down and we will make America affordable again. We're going to make it affordable again. Starting on day one, we will end inflation and make America affordable again. Starting on day one of the Trump administration, we will end inflation and we will make America great again. We will drive prices down and we'll drive them down very fast.
Spoiler alert, he did not drive prices down really fast. The opposite has happened. But look, I want to be fair because when it comes to things like the cost of eggs, okay, avian flu is obviously the reason why we have an egg shortage. And since we have a shortage, we have limited supply, we still have demand, that's going to drive prices up. Donald Trump is not responsible for that. Now, you can definitely ding him for the fact that he said he was going to end inflation on day one. That was a ridiculous claim to make because there are multiple factors that play into why inflation is an issue to begin with. And it really depends on which sector of the economy you're talking about. But let's get into the details in regard to the latest economic data, which the markets certainly did not like. So US inflation did rise to 3% in January. So that is the highest spike in inflation in 7 months. And to really kind of put things in perspective, inflation was at its worst in 2020 when it hit 9% at one point. So 3% inflation isn't like catastrophic compared to what we experienced in 2022. However, the current 3% inflation rate represents overall inflation with energy and food prices included. And to be sure, energy and food prices have gone up. Let's start with groceries. Grocery prices climbed 0.5% compared with the previous month, or 1.9% on a yearly basis. That was driven in large part by a nationwide egg shortage caused by an outbreak of avian influenza or bird flu, which has pushed prices up 15.2% over the past 4 weeks. Now, since last year, egg prices are up 53%. It was the largest monthly increase in egg prices since June of 2015, accounting for roughly 2/3 of the total increase in grocery prices since December. So avian flu and the way it's impacting egg prices is obviously distorting overall inflation as it pertains to grocery prices. But still, I mean, the other thing to keep in mind, right now the Federal Reserve wants to lower inflation to 2%. That is their target, that is their goal. That doesn't mean that the prices are gonna come down. that means that prices will continue. Overall, the consumer price index overall will continue going up little by little, 2%. That is the goal. So that's a little disastrous. Okay, so if anyone's expecting prices to come down, the price of eggs might come down, obviously, when bird flu is over. But overall prices, what you're spending overall on groceries is likely to continue going up. Now let's look at energy. Gasoline prices also rose another 1.8% over the course of the month. And in a story that I covered last week, I talked a little bit about how Donald Trump's grand plan was to pressure Saudi Arabia to drill for more oil, thus increasing the global supply of oil. The idea is that would lower prices. The United States is already the top producer of fossil fuels, also the top exporter of fossil fuels. So any notion that we are not energy independent, it's a ridiculous talking point, because no matter what we do, we'll never be energy independent. We are part of the OPEC plus cartel. That's the global economy of oil producing countries. We have not nationalized our natural resources. These natural resources belong to oil companies, multinational corporations that are looking to sell the fossil fuels to the highest bidder. So we could drill even more and we still won't be energy independent, because we don't own the energy. Private companies do. And Saudi Arabia is not interested in drilling for more oil, because doing so ends up hurting their economy. So part of Trump's big economic plan is not playing out the way he expected it to. So Trump is also getting a lot of heat from the left over the cost of eggs. Please don't be ridiculous, okay? You guys provided cover and defense for Biden because he wasn't responsible for the spike in egg prices. So don't turn around and do the same thing to Trump. But I think we should look at the core consumer price index, which removes volatile food and energy prices. And when you look at that, yeah, inflation's still a problem. Core CPI also showed little improvement. It rose 0.4% from December, or 3.3% on a year-over-year basis, both higher than economists expected. The monthly increase in core prices was the highest since April of 2023. And what would an American economic update be if not for an increase in the price of housing? So shelter prices also increased 0.4% over the month, or 4.4% on a year-over-year basis. And among other categories to increase were airline fares and hotel rates. Boy, don't I know it. Used cars and trucks, as well as automobile insurance, rose, with prices up about 2% from December. So this information, all this data, has reinforced the Federal Reserve's decision to hold off on lowering interest rates, which is something that Donald Trump desperately wants them to do. He wants them to lower interest rates. But the Fed wants inflation at 2% as opposed to 3%. And interest rates are currently hovering around 4.25% to 4.5%. So when asked if rate hikes are likely in the near future, former Fed economist Jonathan Wright said, a rate increase from the central bank is at least as likely as a rate cut in the near term. And so far, the Federal Reserve has signaled that they are not going to cut rates anytime soon, because they see inflation rising again. So let's talk a little bit about the uncertainty. As we all know, there is a lot of uncertainty in the economy right now. Donald Trump loves to talk about tariffs, but we don't really know if he's serious about implementing the tariffs that he's announcing. Oftentimes he announces tariffs without any real intention of implementing the percentages that he's talking about. It's really like a public negotiating tool that he likes to use at his disposal, but it does end up shaking up the markets. And so that has led to uncertainty, and that uncertainty, along with these data points in regard to inflation, led to the markets opening with a dip this morning. So the S&P 500, Dow, and NASDAQ all opened with a noticeable dip this morning. And here's what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said after getting asked by a Fox reporter about Donald Trump's plans and when we can expect inflation to go down.
How long will it take to cycle through and get some of the actual prices that Americans are paying to come down?
Prices at the store and at the grocery pump?
All of the above.
Across the board, sure. Well, the president is doing everything he can, obviously, to reduce the cost of living crisis in this country as quickly as possible. That's why he signed a litany of executive orders across the board. In the first couple of weeks here, he declared a national energy emergency. He committed to cutting 10 regulations for every new one on the book. As you know, working for a Fox business-related outlet, deregulation and energy independence are huge drivers of reducing inflation in this country. And I think Americans can be assured by the results President Trump had in his first term, when, again, inflation was 1.4% when he left office.
But is it months or is it a year? And will Americans have the patience to wait for it?
I don't have a timeline.
You don't have a timeline. Interesting. Well, last month, Vice President J.D. Vance also tempered expectations related to consumer prices dropping. He said, quote, "Rome wasn't built in a day." Vance told CBS News last month, explaining that it's going to take a little bit of time for grocery prices to decline. Look, this isn't shocking. Politicians love to promise the moon and the stars when they're campaigning, and then they immediately lower expectations after they are in power. And so I expected this. But the question is, what's the plan? Because if the big plan was to produce more oil to lower energy prices, and that would have a domino effect on everything else, that's not playing out at all at the moment. And with inflation increasing and with interest rates remaining where they're at, it doesn't look like there's going to be relief for Americans anytime soon.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below, because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.